Hello, I'm Terrell, and this is my critical remix on Marcello in the Real World by Francisco X. Stork. For my critical remix book jacket, I chose to represent much of the front cover as Marcello's thought bubble, drawn in musical notation. This alludes to his I am, or internal music, which he enjoys and often seeks to return to throughout the novel. It alludes to, not represents, the I am, though, because it can't be written out like regular music can. The horse and Bible on the staff represent Marcello's time at Patterson, a school specifically for children with disabilities. Those are his special interests, as he calls them. The first chord represented on the staff, a major triad, is one of the simplest piano chords and is mathematically pleasing to the ear. This represents the beginning of the novel, wherein Marcello's life follows simple, agreeable patterns. This peaceful simplicity also explains my choice of dynamic marking, piano, which demands soft and quiet playing. It's written with that little P there. The I am al fine written above the staff is a pun off of da capo al fine, or DC al fine for short, which is a musical term that tells you to return to the song's beginning and play again from there. This is similar to how Marcello thought his life would continue from here, repeating the things he already enjoys since he already enjoys them. The pun also spells out I am all fine, I guess, since it represents the satisfaction that Marcello felt with his life at the novel's beginning. This satisfaction likely enabled him to listen to his I am, but most of the other characters in the novel dismissed it as a part of his disability, which he says is akin to Asperger's syndrome. Marcello's life gets very complicated very quickly, with solving this Ixtil Vidromech mystery, learning about Jasmine and his dad, and learning what Wendell is really like. The chords I wrote over the bottom half of the sheet music represent this. They are called Coltrane changes, named after John Coltrane, and they are considered some of the hardest chords to improvise over. On top of this, they are jazz chords, not really a classical music progression. And despite popular belief, jazz is a much more complicated style of music than classical. So this represents the growing complexity of Marcello's life. I also drew eighth notes going in a V, and then other eighth notes spelling out B-A-D and B-A-D again, shown by what bass clef line they're on, to signify that Vidromech, the company, is bad, or rather it's an antagonist of this book. This is a bit of a spoiler, but not many people will really notice that V. As the music represented on the page progresses, the notes get shorter in length from whole notes to half, and then quarter, and then eighth notes. They also get louder due to the crescendos I drew, and the forte, the lowercase f, at the end. This all further underscores that Marcello's life gets more and more complicated as the novel progresses. I also drew Jasmine's, Wendell's, and Ixtil's faces in the music staff to represent them. I drew Marcello with a confused yet thoughtful look at the bottom of the page because his mental disability still exists throughout the book. He analyzes situations as they come to him, but isn't always able to quickly enough. He also struggles with fast-paced, multitasked operations. He himself says to Jonah, another character in the novel, "If you knew how much of what people say or do I fail to understand, you would not call me smart." Despite all this, he thinks through all his problems to come to his own conclusions. All of this on the front cover celebrates the counter-story that this novel portrays. An individual on the high-functioning end of the autism spectrum living through a very unexpectedly eye-opening summer. On the inside left flap of the book jacket, I wrote a plot summary. Marcello Sandoval is perfectly satisfied with his life, from the horses at Patterson to the medical appointments with Dr. Malone. But when his father insists that he's missing out on something that can't be found in his daily routines, Marcello has no choice but to venture into the real world of corporate America. But what can the real world hold for Marcelo aside from never-ending complexity? Could love, justice, and truth really exist outside the world he knows? And once he finds out, will he ever be able to return to the way things were before? I made up this plot summary because that's how I interpreted the book. That's the questions that I interpreted the book to answer. People usually read the plot summary on the back cover or inside flap of the book once before deciding to read the full book, and then once again after they finished it. The second time, the full events of the book come rushing back to you while you're reading the plot summary, and you really feel it. I know this happens to me. I know I do this. But it seems so natural that I assume other people do it too. On the inside right flap, I drew the author as a stork because that's his last name, and sometimes authors leave things like that for their author's note instead of an actual picture. I just thought it'd be interesting. His bio from Goodreads reads as such: born in Mexico, Francisco X. Stork moved to El Paso, Texas with his adoptive parents at the age of 9. He attended Spring Hill College, Harvard University, and Columbia Law School. After law school, he worked as an attorney for 33 years and retired in 2015. He is married and has 2 grown children and 3 grandchildren. I moved around some of the facts and added prepositional phrases to change up the sentence structure, but it is all from Goodreads.com, not from me. The bio, not the plot summary. I wrote that. I also wrote down his website, www.franciscostork.com. On the back of my book jacket, I wrote a couple accolades from Sherman Alexie and another one from Wendy Orr. Sherman Alexie's accolade says, mystery, love, and self-discovery without the cliches? Wow, Stork's got game. And Wendy Orr says, outstanding job. Like in life, the ambiguity of the characters is what makes them human. I chose these authors because the protagonists in their novels, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian and Peeling the Onion, respectively, have mental disabilities. Although I have not read either of their books, I believe that, judging from Patricia A. Dunn's analysis of the 2 novels in her article, Carving Out an Identity, the authors portray their protagonists as counter-stories, multi-layered human individuals whose disabilities aren't their only defining characteristic. I believe that Stork paints Marcelo in this multi-layered light as well, so these authors would commend him. I made up the accolades, though, because I couldn't find any actual accolades from those authors about this book. I also drew the Schneider Family Book Award because this novel is the 2010 winner of that award in the teen category. I chose to focus on this novel's counterstory because its ending was more satisfying than I expected it to be. Judging by the paratext, or just the cover, of the novel, I assumed it would be a love story about a recluse meeting a manic pixie dream girl, a living trope, basically, who shows him what life on the outside is like. But that's because Jasmine and Marcelo are on the cover, holding hands, as she leads him away from his treehouse toward the real world, with its streetlights and telephone wires. Instead, I got a book with a somewhat relatable protagonist, solving a compelling law mystery. Although he's mentally disabled, and I am not, he doesn't fit the single story of what that entails, because most people don't understand that autism has a spectrum. Instead of cowering under societal pressures, such as Wendell's pushy desires for Jasmine, or depending heavily on everyone else's help, he deals with very complex moral dilemmas while growing as a person and falling in love. Yet, he never does talk or think the way everyone else does in the novel. He still fails to grasp some concepts, things like that. He still deals with his disability, but none of those things singularly defines him. He is not a flanderized protagonist. From this, I think that all people can learn that humans are complicated. Precious few, none as far as I know, are all bad or all good. And this applies to disabled individuals too. Their condition is not their whole life. They have passions, dreams, and thoughts too.